Hello, I'm Joel Drucker, the new executive editor of tennisplayer.net. Excited to bring you high quality instruction and our new design, our new issue, our new look. And this issue is all about the second most important shot in tennis, the return of serve. I'm joined here by the former pro and current coach, Tim Mayotte. Good to see you, Tim.
Joel, it's great to be here. I've always been a fan of tennisplayer.net. When I started coaching about 25 years ago, I remember going on the site and thinking, holy crap, this stuff is unbelievable. And so it's always been a resource for me, and so excited to have you at the helm.
Well, glad to be with you, Tim, and thank you so much. We're gonna dig in more with Tim about the return, but first I want to tell everyone about the latest issue and what we're up to. Our quest, we are really building on the vision of our founder, the late John Yandel, a real visionary in the world of instruction, in visuals, in science, and all the ways of understanding how to play the game better and how to teach it better. So our quest is to continue on that, and our motto: learn, compete, improve. Again and again, learn, compete, and improve. Every month, that's what we want to bring you, those kind of ideas, those kind of stories. A new facet in 2026 is that each month we're going to look into a very specific aspect of the game. It might be a shot, such as this month, where we're looking into the return to serve. It might be a series of practice techniques, such as next month, we're going to be doing off-court things ranging from visualization to juggling. And then in August, the issue is called Roger Federer. Great stories about the instructional lessons you can learn from this tennis genius. But right now, we're looking at our latest issue, and the subject at hand, I call it the tennis's most neglected child. I wanted to give you a little bit about Tim. He won 12 ATP singles titles, including the first ever edition of the prestigious Miami Open Tennis Masters 1000 event. He reached a career high of number 7 in the world, Davis Cup, silver medal at the Olympics, advanced to the quarterfinals or better at the majors 8 times. More pointedly for our show, Tim beat the great returners of his time. He beat Jimmy Connors, he beat Andre Agassi. As a returner, he faced and beat the great servers of his time: John McEnroe, Boris Becker, Pete Sampras. So since ending his career, he's gone on to teach everyone from nationally ranked juniors to eager high school players, section competitors, and adults of all ages and skills. So Tim wrote a story for us called the 7 Steps of a Great Returner. The seven steps of a great return. And Tim, I want to start. Tell us, you play the great returners, Connors and Agassi. What are the lessons we can learn from these guys and your experiences playing them?
I think the first thing is how absolutely disciplined you have to be when you're playing a player who returns as aggressively as both Jimmy and Andre did. Now, obviously, the game has changed a tremendous amount since the advent, in my mind at least, since the advent of polyester strings. But it's still the same basic core. You have to be ready to play right from the get-go. I think a lot of people they they start a little bit cold, and I used to just get out there and practice my serve as much as possible so that I was ready to play. Those guys actually a lot of times like to return first because they dominate so much with the returner serve. So the most important thing is to remember that you've got to be ready to play from the get-go. Walk out on the court completely warmed up. Make sure you're practicing your serve. Now the second thing is, for those guys, particularly Jimmy and Agassi, they were unbelievable when you stretched them out wide. So I always like to hit a high proportion of serves right into their body, because that way they couldn't unfold in a big way and get into the stronger returns. I'd take the angle away. Sorry, we got a tough team coming through here, but and so always serving, not always, but on big points in particular, serving right into their body, so that at least I knew I was going to see a second ball. If you get a good serve into somebody's right into their core, then you're going to get a look at a second ball. So those were really the main things. I would never change my game. I was a serve and volleyer all the way, so I was coming in regardless. I trusted my volleys better and more than any other shot. But I think those are the first things. You've got to be ready to play. The first point of every game you're serving is critical, and I love to serve big into these guys' bodies.
What were the dynamics of the Connors return compared to the Agassi return? And
Well, they were pretty similar in a lot of ways in that they both had just, I mean, phenomenal timing. But Agassi to me had an advantage in that that forehand of his was better than Jimmy's forehand. So Connors, maybe I think maybe the greatest backhand of all time, but he was a little bit vulnerable on the forehand. So I always felt that if I could get into Jimmy's body on the forehand side, that would bend his left hip. Then I would get a look at a ball, or else he would net a lot more returns. Agassi had a better combination of forehand and backhand, and of course he could put more topspin on the ball too. So the ball was dipping a little bit more. Jimmy's ball I liked because it was so flat and hard. I didn't feel like I had to contend with the spin as much as I did with Andre. But of course, it's a different era too. The rackets are different. Jimmy's playing with that Excalibur, the T2000, so that I think made him a little bit more vulnerable as well.
this is the racket we're referring to, the T2000, the Jimmy Connors racket that he was able to use a racket. About how big is that sweet spot, Tim? About the size of my fingernail? What do you think?
I think that's the only thing that helped me against Jimmy was the fact that that sweet spot was so tiny. But
So,
I do feel like with Jimmy, he was a little bit more vulnerable on the forehand side. Andre, to me, was equally good on both sides.
so beyond then your playing career, I called it the neglected child. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, this poor shot has been left in the practice. What do you want to call it? The practice halfway house. And I'm helping the Tufts team here, and it drives me crazy that they don't practice their returns enough. It's everybody talks about how important serve and return are, and yet when you watch, these guys are hitting tons of cross court ground strokes. They're doing a lot of change of direction, but they're not returning serves enough. And as I hoped I made clear in the article, it's critical to practice the return of serve because first and foremost, it's the trajectory of the ball that's coming at a different angle than any other shot. And if you don't practice it, you're not going to improve.
That gets to the complications. These segue perfectly. Talk about those complications, about the height, about the stance, about the +1 of the server who's going to then, in theory, you did it with the volley. Contemporary players do it with the forehand. What's your thought about that? About why? What is so complicated? What about that height? What's the adjustment that goes on?
Well, in the story itself, I forgot to include something on this famous incident in which Jenny Finch, who is a lot of folks might know as probably the most famous, greatest softball pitcher of all time, she did an exercise against Aled Rodriguez, A-Rod, the great Yankee slugger, and she was able to strike him out a bunch, not because of the speed, but because A-Rod was not used to the trajectory of the ball coming in from below somebody's knee. Now, in tennis, it's the same thing. Learning to see the ball properly and to be able to this is what people have to understand. They're not seeing the ball in tennis. You're learning to track the ball, and over time, with more and more practice, you gauge where the ball is going to bounce and at what contact point you're likely to make contact. If the serve's coming in, you see Boris, I'm playing against Becker, he's serving 130. I'm not seeing that ball. I'm understanding over thousands, tens of thousands of practice returns where the ball is likely to go when I see it come off his racket. You're guesstimating. There's been a lot of talk about Elon Musk's, self-driving cars, and I don't know if they've been super successful yet, but in part, his cars are learning over time where the obstacles are going to be by repetition. They're gathering information, looking to see where an obstacle is likely to be in the near-term future. That's exactly what a great returner is doing when they're practicing the return. Now, it's not only that the ball comes from above the height of any other shot except for maybe an overhead. So we all know that the toss, the contact point, let's say with John Isner, it's probably 9.5 feet high. Someone like Becker might be a foot lower than that. But it's also that you see the ball in relationship to the person's service action. So if the toss is further to the right, you know you're going to get a slice, a right-hander to right side. If the toss is going behind the person's head, you start to understand that there's likely to be a kick serve of some sort. Practice, practice, practice. See the ball, see it in relationship to the opponent. Now, I remember when Chris Everett used to get ready to play Martina Navratilova, she'd be out there all 2 weeks with a lefty server because she knew she'd probably play Chris in the finals. She needs to get used to dealing with a left-handed serve because it just moves completely differently than it. So it's that practice and seeing the ball is the first step to being great at any shot.
So the whole methodology. So maybe we need to think about not so much watching the ball, which is kind of tried and familiar. Maybe think about tracking the ball as it's moving through space and see it from the racket, from the toss, the whole way, because there's a whole methodology about what it means to track a ball and the return. It's hypercritical, and the ones you faced, I think Connors, let's say, versus a serve volleyer in particular, the ability to put the ball at your feet. Today's players do it differently because they don't serve and volley. How did you come to build this 7-step methodology?
Well, I was so lucky, as a player, I had great coaches, and as a coach, I had a great coach. I remember all you teaching pros. This was one of the hardest things I ever did, but I stopped working with the USTA in part because I was with my partner, who his name is Lee Hurst, who taught me so much about teaching. So Lee helped me really dissect ground strokes, and he helped me come up with this system of 7 stages that every ground stroke, which in essence a topspin return or topspin forehand backhand return, has 7 stages in it. Now those stages are obvious from a when you're dealing with a ground stroke from deep in the court. Those 7 stages get compressed when you're dealing with a return to serve because everything has to happen. But it's really a diagram that helps you as a checklist to go through and say, okay, what is the problem? What's going wrong? What part of that stage do we need to work on? The other difference I think with this is that it incorporates. I used drive me crazy. People say, "Oh, I'm working on, I got to become a better mover because tennis is more important to move well than to hit the ball well." I say poppycock to that. That's insane when people say that. It's not. You have to look about how the upper body coordinates with the lower body and vice versa. So the 7 stages look at each separate stage or differentiates each stage so you can diagnose where the problems are. Now, for the return, it's the early stages that are the most important.
So there really is this wedding you make between movement and swinging. It's not as simple as I got to be a better mover. Now I can learn how to swing. You see them as kind of there's a synthesis, right?
It's absolutely true because everyone say, "Oh, that guy doesn't move that well." But the problem, and he might be fast, he might be a quick athlete, but part of the problem comes from the fact that if the start of the swing is not really right, that can impact the balance and the speed of the player as they move towards the ball. So at the start of, it's always the first stage is the split step and the ready position. Now, for instance, if somebody is leaning too far forward when they split, which happens a lot. I remember I was working a couple days with Christina McHale, and I so desperately wanted to change her posture because she was leaning forward way too much on her ground strokes, including her return to serve. And that lean forward drastically, of course, you're talking at the level of the pros, but drastically impacted her ability to move left, right, or back. And so each stage has to be done exactly right to then allow for improvement in the next stage, and then the whole thing unfolds.
How do I begin? How does the player begin to assimilate these stages? Is there a drill? Is there a routine? Is there a thing they can do
Well,
to
I'd have to work with a qualified coach. I was just listening to Brian Teacher, who's a great teacher, no pun intended, and he was just talking about the primary importance of all these basic elements. He talks about technique and movement. He also talks about spacing, which to me comes under a visual. So I know you've worked with Steve Stefanke, who is absolute master at knowing what those beginning stages will look like. Now, people might have a different terminology, but it's the same thing: balance, posture at the start, timing of the split step. But a good coach will guide somebody through. And then of course you could copy Jimbo or Agassi or to me Novak, who is the most technically perfect player we've ever seen.
let's get to Novak. That's a good time for it. I wanted to bring that up. What has he done to build on the foundation of guys like Connors and Agassi? And maybe where do we begin to learn from? There's looking at it like a great work of art in Florence, Italy, and this is neat. But okay, all right, I want to kind of incorporate that. Is my foot? Is it my hand? Is it my hip? Is it you serving? Is it my friend serving to me? Is it someone hand feeding me? What is it? What begins it?
Well, there's a lot of ways to begin it, but the best way really is to get a good coach, but also to copy what you see. Now, if we were to take Novak, Andre, and Jimbo, you would see these things: a wide foundation, so super wide base. When
Past the
there's
shoulders,
that's
past the
right, so that allows you to have a powerful first step to the ball if you need to lunge out wide, and it gets the mass nice and low. Second thing they all have is amazing timing on the split step. These guys are down to hundredths of a second. Their timing. Now, what is perfect timing? It means you're at the top of the peak of the step or just coming down at the contact of the incoming ball. And when you're facing a 130 or 40 mile an hour serve, then even the loss of a couple hundredths of a second can be critical. Then posture. So when you have that wide base accompanied with a good time split step in perfect posture, which usually means you're going to lean forward just a couple degrees, because with most returns, you want to develop energy by pushing forward. So those are the three elements. You could put the screen up, one, boom, 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 all three of those guys right next to each other. Oh my God, it's just like, I get chills just thinking about it.
Yeah, it's amazing how much discipline and in their case, all the two-hander. They've got that
Yeah.
turn and really, I mean, yeah,
Well,
you
yeah, let
said
me just build on that. So the turn, so you got the split step and then the turn, that's the unit turn where the outside foot rotates and then the shoulders rotate usually to close to 90 degrees. That obviously helps get the racket back and prepared. You've got the open foot so that you can shuffle to the side or lunge over. And all three of those guys, I mean, there's just not that much variation. They do something. They might have slightly different grips. They might be in slightly different positions on the court. But as we get into Novak, let me just say one thing. So, what Novak has done, and this is what I say about the modern game, it hasn't really changed that much. But Novak has gotten longer and stronger. So, what do we mean by that? We mean that his flexibility allows him to be wider at the split step than either Jimbo or Andre. That allows more power. That enables bigger first step if he needs to, a bigger first lunge. And particularly critical, we've seen that on the open stance backhand return that, Andre was great at, but he didn't have that kind of flexibility. I mean, Novak changed the game. I remember maybe 12, 15 years ago, watching him play and say, this guy has got a wider base. He's more flexible than anybody in the history of the game. And it's that width, that length, that has made him the greatest, to me, greatest player of all time.
So the training methodology has to do a lot with the off court of building flexibility and stretching and doing some of that work before I'm on the court. Once and there are things you can work on it with a trainer or stretching or certain things on the court. Where does the player focus their attention as they begin to return serve to start? Do they is it eyes? Is it the tracking technique that we really need to concentrate on? Is it I know it becomes all of it. It cascades into all of it. Where do we start?
Well, I would say that you've, first of all, just what you said is exactly right. As far as it starts in the gym, but then there's no substitute for what happens on the court. And having somebody serve to you over and over and over, and if it's a young player, you have to bring their eyes to realizing, well, what's going on here? Where's the toss and where's that serve most likely to go? So then you just gauge where the player is at, and then you decide by looking at those 7 steps where things are breaking down. Now, for the beginning player, it's the split step and the unit turn that is so much the center of what they have to do. The split step and the unit turn. Get those things down, because that early, it's like, we talk about building a foundation for a house. Learning the timing, the posture, the wide base, and then the rotation of the shoulders, then you've accomplished, let's say 70% of what you need to do to hit a good return. I had a great volley, and actually I was a very good returner, and I think a lot of it, there's a lot of similarities. One with where you're driving the ball, and one where you're hitting slices, but there's a lot of similarities. Wide base, good rotation, great vision, over and over and over. And I know I'm guilty of this. Coaches, get your kids to return serve.
Very interesting. So when practicing those returns early, do they need to be against fast serves, or they should just be about serves, just to get kind of like it's like batting practice? Is that kind of
And I was watching this warm up of Sinner a couple weeks ago, and how slow he was doing things at the beginning. So slowly and methodically, because he just wanted to get things exactly right. Landing, feeling the feet on the ground with the split step. Doesn't have to be wide, doesn't have to be powerful. Feeling and then turning. Watching the ball right to contact. Start slowly, but then obviously you have to go up the track, and you got to start where the player is at. Which of these stages are you looking at, and which one are you working at, and then for the different level. But for intermediate players, make sure that you're doing the split step right with the racket head and posture, and then the turn of the shoulders. I love to do this in the gym with the mirror, because you see that you're returning, or I should say getting the racket back properly with the unit turn. So remember, folks, it's called the unit turn. Stage 2 is the unit turn, because the whole unit of your core rotates. What does that do? A number of things. It brings the racket back, starts its preparation back, but also there's been so much good stuff on vision lately. By turning the head, you allow yourself enough time to get good depth perception on the incoming ball. If you wait a long time before you turn, you're not going to see the ball when you have to rotate at the end of the shot as opposed to at the beginning. Because, again, if you don't see the ball well, then there's no chance. So I recommend that people split step, rotation. Make sure the racket's getting back. And then after that, we'd have to start talking about what is the appropriate footwork pattern. But I think those first 2 things are the most important for intermediate players all the way up. And I've seen pros who don't do this well either, but it's
Great. Well, we're gonna wrap up shortly, but I think it was also fascinating to hear you, and I saw it as you discussed it, the connection between volleying and returning, about turning and preparation and movement, because we know about the quality volleying, and you had the best forehand volley maybe ever of moving. It's a movement shot. It's not just a static shot, and we need to think of the return. Tim, just a last question or two. Are there other things in the big picture you want to make sure people understand about how to become an effective returner?
well, there's always different things you look at. So first of all, we talked about technique, and I think that's a good place to start. The second thing is you want to talk about tactics. Now, the returning position is drastically changed with the advent of polyester strings, where players are much further back. So, why do they do that? So, the thinking is that being way back in the court gives you a lot of time to take a full, big, like ground stroke swing on the ball. And that allows you also on the second shot to be moving forward as you're coming off of the return of serve. The bigger point is tactics. Understand your strengths. Now, let's say for a high school kid who has a terrible backhand, I think they should return serve
Yeah, I guess not.
cheating way over on the backhand side. Because if their backhand's no good, then they should be hitting as many forehands as possible. So you got to think tactically as well. What are the shots you want to hit, and how do you force your opponent to hit the ball to that particular spot? So it's really that combination of technique that we talked about, but also when you're playing, it's tactics. Understanding how do you hit more of your strong shots and what's your opponent's weaker shot.
That is great. Well, look, Tim, I want to thank you for taking time to talk with us. It's been a great show, and I hate to say this, but I say many happy returns. Oh, that's so bad, but
You got to return. But also, I want to point out that John Yandel is dearly missed. He was a visionary. He, I think, undressed a lot of us coaches by letting us see deeply into what exactly is happening with a tennis player. And he really pushed us all to get better, and he is missed.
I agree. I couldn't agree with you more, and we hope to keep building on this. So, thank you, Tim. This is Joel Drucker for TennisPlayer.net, looking at a return issue. Our next podcast show is going to be about some training techniques you can do off the court as well. So, thank you, Tim, and goodbye for now.
Thanks, Joel.